If you've spent the last few nights scrolling through endless specs sheets, watching unboxing videos, and still feel stuck between looks cool and does it actually play my games smoothly, you're not alone. I've been there, staring at rows of Ryzen versus Intel, RTX 3060 versus 4060, trying to picture how each build would sit on my desk and whether it would survive a marathon Saturday with friends overclocking the graphics. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. In this review I'm going to break down why the ViprTech Ghost 3.0 might be the answer to that indecision, and where it could end up being a mismatch for your setup. First off, the Ghost 3.0 is a pre-built system that arrives ready to power on. That alone solves the biggest friction point for a lot of gamers who aren't comfortable assembling parts or troubleshooting BIOS settings. The box arrives with a Ryzen 7 processor, an RTX 4060 graphics card, 16GB of RAM, and a 1TB NVMe SSD, all wrapped in a sleek Onyx chassis that hides most of the cables. The headline numbers sound impressive, but let's move past the marketing and see what that hardware actually does in a real-world gaming session. I ran the machine through a typical Friday night lineup: Valorant for a quick warm-up, Apex Legends for a competitive sprint, Elden Ring for a story-driven session, and Cyberpunk 2077 at 1440p with ray tracing turned on low. In Valorant the frame rate stayed well above 150 frames per second, which means you could crank the monitor to 240 Hz and still have headroom for a sudden rush of enemies. Apex Legends hovered around 115 frames per second on high settings, delivering a buttery experience without any stutter. Elden Ring was the first place I felt the GPU's limits. At 1440p with high textures it settled around 55 to 60 frames per second, which is playable but not the silky 60+ you might expect from a higher-end card. Dropping to medium pushed it back up to the mid-70s. Finally, Cyberpunk 2077 with ray tracing on low and DLSS enabled ran at about 45 frames per second, which is acceptable if you're okay with a slightly lower refresh, but not ideal for competitive play. What's interesting about those numbers is that the CPU and storage combo really shine in the non-gaming moments. Loading screens in Elden Ring dropped from the usual 12-second wait to under 6 seconds thanks to the 1TB NVMe drive. Booting Windows and launching applications like Photoshop or Premiere Pro felt instantaneous, and multitasking between a game and a Discord voice chat never caused a hiccup. That's the hidden value in the Ghost 3.0. The SSD isn't just about game installs, it's about shaving minutes off every workflow you throw at it. Now, let's talk about the practical strengths you'll actually notice day to day. The Ryzen 7, a 5800X class chip, provides plenty of headroom for background tasks: streaming, recording, or running a voiceover while gaming. I tested a live Twitch stream at 1080p 60 frames per second with the in-game overlay running, and the system kept the game smooth while the encoder stayed under 30% of the CPU. The RTX 4060, while not the flagship, hits a sweet spot for 1080p and solid 1440p performance without the power draw of the 4070 series. The 8GB of VRAM is enough for most modern titles at those resolutions, but you'll notice it when you try to push textures beyond ultra or enable higher resolution ray tracing. The chassis includes a tasteful RGB lighting strip that can be turned off or set to a subtle pulse, which is a nice touch for those who enjoy a bit of visual flair without an over-the-top light show. On the flip side, the Ghost 3.0 does have a few trade-offs that become clear once you open the side panel. Upgradability is limited compared to a custom build. The case uses a compact layout that makes adding a second GPU or expanding beyond the existing 16GB of RAM a bit of a puzzle. You'd need to replace the RAM sticks entirely if you want to go to 32GB, and the power supply is sized for the current components, leaving little headroom for a future RTX 4070 or higher capacity SSD. The RGB system, while nice, is controlled through a proprietary app that sometimes lags or fails to sync with Windows startup. If you're a fan of fine-tuned lighting scenes, you might find that limiting. Finally, the price point sits a bit above a comparable DIY build. You're paying for the convenience of a pre-built, the USA-based quality assurance, and the aesthetic design, but you're also paying a premium that a savvy builder could shave off with careful part selection. So, who should actually consider buying this machine? If you're a gamer who wants to jump straight into modern titles at 1080p or solid 1440p without spending a weekend troubleshooting drivers, the Ghost 3.0 checks that box. It's also a good fit for streamers who need a reliable encoder and enough RAM to keep chat, overlays, and recording software running simultaneously. The built-in SSD means you won't have to wait for long install times, which is a huge convenience if you like to rotate through several games each week. Moreover, the Onyx chassis blends well in a living room setup where